breaking news tonight, cruelty in Fulton County and Fulton County Court. How can this be constitutional? Well, it's not. A judge refusing to entertain a question of bail for this 19th defendant, Harrison Floyd. It is not a question of amount of bail. The judge simply refused to even consider the issue of bail. She said essentially she's the wrong judge. That's absolutely unthinkable. So where is the right judge? And why isn't he working? Note to Georgia and to the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis, everyone has constitutional rights, not just your pals who you agree with. The 8th Amendment to the Constitution doesn't just suggest, it mandates against excessive bail. Fulton County, read it. Fani Willis, read it. The 8th Amendment comes right after the 7th, in case you need help finding it. And not even considering bail, passing it off to some future date for consideration is excessive and is destructive to constitutional rights. And so now co-defendant Harrison Floyd has to spend another night in Fulton County Jail. And you know the Fulton County Jail, it's like none other. It's disgraceful, it's disgusting. Bed bugs, lice. 7 deaths just this year in that jail. And there is so much more, which is why that jail is currently under federal investigation for civil rights violations. Last night, former President Donald Trump got a look inside the Fulton County Jail. Today, he sent out this campaign email. It reads in part, quote, "While I was being arrested, I got a firsthand look at the poor and disgraceful conditions of the Fulton County Jail. It's worse than you could even imagine. It's violent. The building is falling apart. Inmates have dug their fingers into the crumbling walls and ripped out chunks to fashion over 1,000 shanks." End of quote. Now, these deplorable conditions, they are no secret to the DA or even to the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, who's investigating that jail. But no one's stopping Fulton County from holding people there. Who does that? Who puts people in a jail like that? And Floyd is held there tonight because he did not have a bail agreement with DA Willis after voluntarily walking right into that jail and surrendering. In just a few minutes, you're going to learn more about who Harrison Floyd is. But first, well, you can't make this stuff up. There is now a Trump marketing extravaganza. Mugs, shirts, you name it. And yes, Trump may be the only person in the world to make a fortune off a mugshot. I'll get to that. But first, all 19 defendants charged in Fulton County DA Fani Willis's indictment have now been booked. Here they are on your screen. And today, more news. A 4th defendant in the Georgia case, Kathy Latham, filed a pleading asking a federal judge to take the trial away from the Fulton County Court and place it in a federal court for trial. Latham is the former GOP chair for Coffee County, Georgia. She is charged with conspiracy to commit election fraud. Her court pleading to a federal judge is asking for this removal reads in part, quote, "Mrs. Latham was acting pursuant to the guidelines of the Constitution at the direction of the President of the United States." She asserts that her conduct is legally consistent with what happened in 1960 in Hawaii when Nixon and Kennedy ran against each other and there were contested results. And she also points out that what happened in that election contest in Hawaii in 1960 was, quote, cited as a precedent by advocates for Democratic presidential candidate Al Gore during the contested 2000 presidential election, end quote. Good evening, I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. Tonight, one defendant is being held in Fulton County Jail. His name, Harrison Floyd. He's been sitting in that jail since yesterday afternoon. He will remain detained until a bond is set. But there's one other step for him to be free pending trial. He must be able to pay that bond if it ever does get set, or he's going to sit there until after trial. That could be months and months or even longer. But who is Harrison Floyd, and what is he charged with? Correspondent Bob Brooks is here to tell us. Bob?
Yeah, hey there, Greta. He served our country in the Marines. He's the former director of Black Voices for Trump, but tonight, Harrison Floyd, he remains in jail. And I can tell you, Greta, there are people who care about him very much. And they also say what Fulton County DA Fani Willis is accusing him of just isn't true. Now, today he had a hearing, but Judge Scott McAfee wasn't there. It was a new judge, Greta, you said that. Floyd argued he couldn't make bail, but again, that didn't really matter because that new judge said he'll remain in jail until Judge McAfee comes back from, guess what? Vacation. Anyways, this is what he's accused of. That's harassing Fulton County election worker Ruby Freeman. The indictment by DA Fani Willis alleges Floyd took part in a January 4th, 2020 conversation in which Freeman was told she needed protection and was pressured to make false statements about election fraud. But tonight, criminal defense attorney Dwayne Cates says Floyd was merely doing his job.
It would be normal, okay, to be part of a team like this, to investigate election fraud or election irregularities. It would be normal for that to send people out to interview people, to interview poll workers, to interview people that were counting votes.
Now, we also spoke with Cates about why Floyd is still in jail. Well, one theory is he was previously charged with assaulting an FBI agent back in May when he was served a subpoena for a federal grand jury in D.C. Those agents reportedly showed up at Floyd's home with his daughter. They were unannounced. Floyd allegedly felt threatened. Well, Cates says Floyd was likely within his rights to feel that way.
And was trying to protect himself and his family and his child. And that should not be held against him when considering bond.
But we also spoke with someone else tonight. She's Dr. Carol M. Swain, a former professor at Vanderbilt and Princeton universities. She worked with Floyd at the Black Voices for Trump. She knows him personally. Here's her theory for why Floyd is still behind bars.
I can't imagine, a more gentler man than Harrison Floyd. And I believe that he is being incarcerated because he headed Black Voices for Trump. And if you're a Black conservative, you find yourself singled out and harassed. You're seen as a traitor for your people.
Greta, Dr. Swain put it very bluntly tonight. She is going to fight to get him out of jail.
I think that it's political and that Harrison Floyd is paying a high price. He has a family, a child, a wife, and I want to see him go home to his family.
Greta, I know there are many people who feel the same way Dr. Swain does, but for the time being, Harrison Floyd remains behind bars. No bail. Judge McAfee on vacation. Greta?
Bob Brooks, thank you. Former federal prosecutor, former assistant DA attorney in Cobb County, Georgia, Francey Hakes, and former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, Joe Moreno, joins me. Francey, this sets me on fire because it's not a question of, I know he's got that FBI fuss that he had, but that's not the reason why he has no bail. It's because a judge is on vacation and because another judge is, it is so beyond words. I'd fire both of them. I'd get rid of both those judges. They know better. Anyway, maybe you have a softer view of this, but I think it's so outrageous this guy doesn't at least have a bond on his head that he can try to meet to get out.
I don't have a softer view on this, Greta. This is utterly outrageous. I have worked for 3 district attorney's office in this state, a small, a medium, and a large office. And superior court judges like Judge McAfee, they don't hear bond. It is a magistrate judge duty. In fact, in your open, Greta, you showed the courtroom, you showed a judge in it, you showed defendants that were sitting in jail. The judge doesn't even have to go to jail. The defendants don't even have to be brought over. Fulton County has that video court system for things like initial appearances and bond, which this was today. There's no excuse for the magistrate not setting bond. Superior court judges, which is our felony trial level judge here in Georgia, do not hear bond matters. They do not hear initial appearances. That is completely outside the regular course of order here.
Why didn't she do that? Why didn't she put a bond on her head because it's Friday? Why didn't she do that?
I don't know, because also, Greta, it violates the criminal rules of procedure here in Georgia. He's entitled to have had a bond set. He's already been in jail more than 24 hours. He is entitled to a bond legally, and I don't understand what is happening.
Constitutionally
Somebody ought
at
to
this
be
point.
beating down the doors of that jail and get him out.
I'd get rid of the judge, both those judges, either one who's too ignorant to know that she could have set a bail. I can't believe that. Another one who's got the biggest case of his whole life and he's on vacation. He doesn't have someone replacing him. I'd get rid of both of them. Joe, you know who else I'd get rid of?
He could have made a call. Scott McAfee has a phone. If he had wanted to set a bond in the case, if it was really up to him, all he had to do was tell the magistrate the amount he'd set. That's it.
All right, and Joe, and the DA is just sitting there. I don't know if she's in the courtroom or not, but she let this happen. She let this happen knowing the Constitution says that you have a right to not have excessive bail. Excessive bail means you get something.
we're seeing the human element of what happens with heavy-handed prosecutions, right? I mean, Donald Trump, he's a tough guy. He's got the means and the resources to defend himself. But now we're talking about regular people in this case in Georgia who are going to be bankrupted by the cost of their attorneys and who have things like this happen to them. And this poor guy is going to be sitting in jail probably for the weekend now. So I think that it's one thing to talk at a high level about legal theories and about whether or not they're piling on Donald Trump and they're high-fiving over the 91 different counts in these different cases, which is kind of ridiculous, really. But we can't forget, there's real people that will be affected here, and that's the tragedy here. And then if these cases are eventually whittled down or even overturned, which I think many of these counts will be, these folks will really have their lives torn apart in the process.
And of course, look, the thing that, that none of us, the three of us wants to talk about, I assume it's really uncomfortable, but this is an African-American man. Out of the 19, there's one other African-American. And who's getting cheated and treated the worst? I mean, he has no, I mean, this is so outrageous. I mean, how do we tell African Americans, oh, the system's it's pretty level. Everyone gets treated the same.
Yeah, I mean, I can't understand why they didn't go out of their way to make sure that he wasn't let go today. He did. He flew down to Georgia. He flew to Georgia. He turned himself in. He's following the rules. And to make him stay in not just any old place, but that place, I mean, that's horrible. It's horrendous.
Francey, the thing that really enrages, I mean, there's so many things that enrage me about this, but right now, the Attorney General of the United States is well aware of the conditions of that judge because his office is investigated. I'm sure he's home, happy as can be, or sitting in his office 3 blocks away at the Department of Justice right now. He knows what conditions those people are in, not just this man, but everybody. And he's sitting there, and they could move this a lot faster. The DA knows that she sends them to that jail. The judge sends them to those jails. They all know this. They're up to their eyeballs in this. It's a horrible situation. It's stunning to me.
Well, Greta, it's actually worse than that, because back in the early 2000s, when I was an assistant U.S. attorney here, that jail was under federal receivership by Judge Marvin Shube. Federal District Judge Marvin Shube was in receiver position over that jail, which was the second time that jail was in a federal receivership, and the conditions are still the way they are. So it's not just the Attorney General, it's not just the district attorney, it's not just the sheriff, it's also the entire federal judiciary here in Atlanta. Nobody seems to care what is going on in that jail, and it's been going on for decades, literally.
I just, it's beyond. I'm just absolutely speechless that so many people could. Forget the Constitution for a second, which they're all in violation of, because you've got a right not to have excessive bail, which includes you get some bail. But just how cruel that everyone's just going home tonight, knowing they're going to leave this guy in the jail, knowing they're leaving everybody else in the jail, knowing the conditions of the jail, the DA asking for someone to be sent to that jail, the judge not showing up because he's on vacation. I don't, in my wildest dreams in the system, I've never seen such utter, cruelty. It's just stunning. Let's leave the black guy in the jail for the weekend. Francey, Hakes, and Joe Moreno, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Greta.
Coming up,